Honorable Senators, when the business of the Senate was suspended for lunch, we were at second reading of bills. Senator the Honorable Darren Henfield was in the middle of his contribution.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. When we took the lunch break, I was trying to suggest to the government that perhaps we can consider augmenting the bread basket items with more healthy choices, particularly given the issues with non-communicable diseases with which we grapple in this country, such as diabetes and hypertension and the likes. And so we thought it would be good and considerate for the government to look at removing those things that may not be so healthy for us, right? Because we know a lot of items in that bread basket are not really good for consumption. But adding things like nuts and fresh oranges and fresh pineapples and bananas and grapes and the like. And so I'll move on now. You know, Mr. Vice President, ironically, our fellow CARICOM state, Trinidad and Tobago, is doing just the opposite than what we're doing here by adding VAT to our bread basket. They are actually zero rating theirs. And in her budget statement of 2022, entitled Resilience in the Face of a Global Pandemic, delivered on the 4th of October 2021, the Honorable Combe Imbert, Minister of Finance of Trinidad and Tobago, stated the following: to provide immediate relief, I propose instead to expand the list of basic food items that are exempted from value-added tax. This will include the zero rating of basic food items such as biscuits, cooking oil, canned vegetables, cornflakes, canned fish, canned meat, juice, sausages, ham, ketchup, bottled water, and pigtails. This measure will take effect from November 1st, 2021, and an appropriate list of items will be published. In a media release dated 6th of October 2021, entitled Clarification of the Basic Food Items to be Made VAT-Free, a list of the basic food items was included. And I'm not going to go through it to be exhaustive. I think we mentioned most of them. Yes, and that's in a press release put out by the Ministry of Finance of Trinidad and Tobago. And so, Mr. Vice President, what makes this particular amendment even more odious is the fact that we are also reducing VAT on the purchases of land worth $2 million or more from 12% to 10%. From what I have read on this point recently, even members of the Bahamas Real Estate Association lament this approach because they feel, as we do, that those who can afford it should be able to pay the 12% on a land purchase, $2 million or more. And that's just you're my friend, man. You can afford it. Yeah, and so, Mr. Vice President, I was very pleased to hear the Minister responsible for Economic Affairs and his guarded approach to our recovery. Of course, I expect no less from him, a seasoned veteran on his now, I believe, fourth iteration of Parliament, who appreciates that with an economy that is touristic and based, subject to exogenous shocks, anything could happen any day. And he even mentioned this new variant of the virus. So when our administration presented the fiscal year 2020-2021 annual budget communication on the 27th of May 2020, our country was in the encoded stages of addressing the COVID-19 pandemic, while simultaneously trying to recover from Hurricane Dorian, the worst of its kind in recorded history. Our accelerated Bahamas recovery plan was anchored by three core objectives, namely engendering the well-being and confidence of our people, maintaining economic stability, and planting seeds for accelerated recovery. And obviously, this plan has borne fruit that the government of the day now reaps. And we're pleased for that. We're also pleased for the recognition of the Minister and the Financial Secretary that this is indeed the case. And so, Mr. Vice President, tourism bookings, per an article that I read in The Guardian, dated the 15th of November, 2021, entitled Unprecedented Tourism Boost by a COVID Upgrade, will rival or surpass the record-breaking numbers we saw in 2019. That's good news for the country. According to Sandy Sands, a much-respected member of the tourism community the world over, and I quote, "I am thinking we're on pace or slightly better ahead of meeting 2019 levels. I would say certainly by the end of 2022, first quarter, we'll be fully recovered." I mean, who could ignore the observations of the Governor General of the Central Bank, just honored by an international body, Mr. John Rowell, who in his remarks attributed to him on the 1st of November 2021 stated the following: "The Bahamian economy continues a steady but paced recovery from COVID-19 pandemic, as evident from the resumption in tourism and associated foreign currency receipts through the private sector. Economic activity has also been stimulated throughout by the varied foreign investment inflows, particularly into tourism-related ventures and residential properties that have sustained construction activity." But there are, I think the minister recognizes, there are some impediments to our recovery. And that said, Mr. Vice President, the deadly COVID pandemic, which has now presented yet another variant, will continue to threaten a full-fledged return of tourism. And that's unfortunate. And so that's why we always, at every occasion, encourage our people to become vaccinated, to make us more viable in the industry for people to visit. Nassau Guardian's editorial letter of Friday, the 26th of February, 2021, holds true to this notion, where the author quoted the following: "In its October 2020 World Economic Outlook, the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, which indicated that global recovery is not assured while the pandemic continues to spread, said the ascent will likely be long, uneven, and uncertain." I'm sure the minister is aware of this. Moreover, Mr. Vice President, with the new variant threatening the world as we speak, it's reported to be in more than 20 countries, we can anticipate retractions in the labor market, which will undoubtedly result in a further disruption to the supply and further disruptions to the supply and distribution chain. You know, Senator Raming alluded to this, but Bahamian businesses involved in the importation of goods are severely challenged, some indicating that demand for containers and space on freighters are resulting in shipping companies reaping a windfall of enormous proportions. Not only are the containers more expensive, but also the goods that those containers carry. Reportedly, a trailer from China, which cost $6,500 to ship last year, now costs $19,500. Similarly, a trailer from the United Kingdom, which cost $4,500 to ship last July, recently cost $11,500 to ship. And so, Mr. Vice President, the observations of this Bahamian businessman are borne out by an article I read by Chester Roberts in the business section of the Nassau Guardian of the 2nd of December, 2021, under the heading "Supply Chain Issues Causing Price Highs Never Seen Before," says Cisco exec. In the mentioned article, Director of Merchandising at Cisco Bahamas Services, Tiffany Evans, in describing the impact of supply chain issues on the Bahamas, said as follows: "I have never in all my years in this industry seen prices this high." After indicating that their inability to move those containers impact the entire world because they're fighting for container space, the executive went on to say this causes high freight costs and long delays. She then went on to intimate that labor shortages across the world has meant that there has been a shortage of many types of products. These issues have led to inflationary prices that we've not seen since she's working in the industry. Mr. Vice, President, so factors associated with production, coupled with rising shipping costs, backed up waterways and container ports and point of delivery troubles, and the rising cost of fuel and food will contribute tremendously to inflation. And so that's why it begs the question as to why the government just can't wait for about 6 months to 9 months, or even a year before implementing this ill-conceived political promise, which puts additional burdens on low and middle-income, vulnerable Bahamian families. And so, Mr. Vice President, with so many uncertainties like COVID variants and production supply chain challenges, why add 100% plus tax to zero-rated items that vulnerable families need for every day by putting a 10% increase on the bread basket? I mean, medicines and other essentials. Mr. Vice President, simply put, consumers will continue to pay more for goods at the counter should the current trends hold, which brings me to another point. And I think the minister made this sufficiently, recognizes that we have no cause or no room for any excesses. And I appreciate that, so I'll move on. And so whilst we appreciate the current uptick in visitor arrivals and foreign direct investments in the pipeline, we must simultaneously work on diversifying our economy. Although the notion of reinforcing our tax collection regimes to make up for the shortfalls will result from this amendment, the shortfalls that would result from this amendment sounds good and politically correct to say, but we know we must recognize that a depressed economy does not give rise to such an outcome. With little to no income in the last 19 months or so, it will be like, pulling blood from a stone to ask Bahamians and Bahamian businesses to give that which they simply do not have. I think that was recognized also. And even in boom times, this was a difficult proposition for the government to be able to collect duly on its taxes owed. Even in good times, that was difficult to do. So I know in these more trying times, it's going to become a little bit more. And so the pressing issues before us remains, even in this new day, how we fix public health, to treat with an ongoing pandemic, how we provide the necessary social support to sustain the vulnerable, how we inspire growth in the domestic economy to the benefit of Bahamians, and how we support businesses that are owned by Bahamians. At one point during our time in office, we made available more than $53 million in business and continuity loans and grants to small businesses, because we recognize that it is the small businesses of the economy that really keeps the engine going when everything falls apart from the outside. If we can continue to grow small businesses in the Bahamas, we can have strength in our economy that will not likely be impacted by external threats or shocks. And so, Mr. Vice President, I believe that the government's fiscal reform in our current disposition must of necessity include the protection of citizens, the maintenance of economic stability, and the planting of seeds for economic recovery, which can only be realized through diversification of our economy. Toward this end, as of May 2021, more than $4.2 million in concessions had been granted to over-the-hill businesses, which we thought was a very important thing to do, to try and get them involved and engaged more deliberately in the economy of the Bahamas. Mr. President, in the previous administration, we were always accused of lacking that grand vision that could potentially reform our country and put us on that path to the full realization of our potential. Sadly, I know this is just a supplementary budget, and I await the main budget, which will come later on next year, mid-next year, sometime around May. Midterm, I see no semblance of a grand vision in the supplementary budget, and that's fair enough. I understand that you're realigning some things to make more palatable those decisions that you've made with various ministries. Well, I believe the Bahamas has potential of being the best little country in the world, and we have to do some things differently. I quote the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister of Finance during his supplementary budget statement, who said, "We have been clear that we believe that the country needs big and transformative change." I agree with the Prime Minister. I believe disaster Preparedness is a good place to begin, big, to become big, and to become transformative. We live in the hurricane belt. Climate change, which outside of COVID-19 seems to be the topic of the day, has spurred more frequent and more ferocious storms to come our way. It was amazing to hear Grand Bahama. And did you say about 10? And the last, that's incredible. That's incredible. The Minister of Finance also said in his statement that the Ministry of Disaster Preparedness Management and Reconstruction no longer exists. He went on to say instead that now that this defunct ministry's budget has been moved to the Office of the Prime Minister, we can go towards the disaster preparedness reconstruction. And as you can see, many so-called cuts that have been pointed out. But I just want to say that that is a good thing that funding has gone to the DRA, which is desperately needed. The DRA has made a tremendous amount of, I'm wrapping up right now, Mr. President. The DRA has made a lot of commitments to the people in Abaco and in Grand Bahama. And of course, they need funding in order to be able to do that. Honduran victims eagerly await the resumption of voucher payments in Abaco and Grand Bahama to realize the goal of returning to somewhat of a better place post-Dorian. But it begs the question as to whether the DRA will take the disaster preparedness on as well. Having personally experienced Hurricane Dorian, I'm sure, like many others here from Grand Bahama, it is my considered view that our disaster preparedness disposition must now look well beyond securing our homes, battening up, as we say in the Bahamas, and seeking to evacuate or move citizens to a safe quadrant ahead of them. We need specially designed shelters for our people that can withstand winds upwards of 250 miles per hour, such as the kind which we were trying to build in central Abaco post-Dorian, spurred by a donation of more than $1 million from India. We need seawalls to mitigate the ongoing erosion of our shorelines, particularly in the Family Islands. We need evacuation protocols specific to every population center in our country. We need fully trained, fully qualified, and fully resourced disaster risk managers in our islands. The island administrators, they've been doing a great job along with the local government councils and assigned government, just 1 minute, please. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, maybe. Along with assigned government and utilities supervisors, they do well with support from NEMO, but in many instances, they are concerned with securing their own families and properties and simply are unable to go that extra mile. And so, Mr. Vice President, that said, I see no grand plan to bring transformative change to our country in the government's blueprint for change or in their redo of the budget we left in place. In conclusion, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, it's the government's prerogative to realign budgeted funding toward the realization of its policies and goals. And no one in this country will complain about the overall reduction in VAT to 10% across the board. That said, however, we on this side as the government, we on this side as the opposition, we ask the government to reconsider the application of VAT on bread basket items and medicines. And at least until we are out of the fiscal woods, reconsider the reduction of VAT on property purchases at $2 million or more. Those purchasing such properties in the Bahamas can absorb the cost. And with that, Mr. Vice President, I thank you.
As many the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable James Roll Turner.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice President, and thank you. You know, I must declare that I have watched over the years the behavior and the responses of our people in many settings, and I've always been entertained by the nature of intelligent people attempting to distort, misalign, and even withdraw accolades that ought to be given to deserving persons, and sometimes even governments. And I ought to tell you that I had purpose in my heart that in this chamber, I will never be accused of such a thing. This supplemental budget is a good, a just, and a timely supplemental adjustment. I have been influenced occasionally by certain sales, and sometimes my concern with the sale was that not the entire store was on sale. But nonetheless, I have learned always to be grateful for every bit of relief that came my way, because I know how it feels to see others getting relief on caviar and plain parts, while we are concerned with the purchase of poultry and the maintenance associated with our cars' daily use. During that same time that others got a break on caviar, plain parts, and even commercial washers, the common folk got little or no aid. So, Mr. Vice President, when this current government presented this supplementary budget, especially to lower VAT, I stand here to just share a few things. Firstly, it is always good when people and organizations keep their word. It wasn't so long ago that it was echoed throughout the streets of our country that when the change of a new day comes, we shall see a reduction in value-added tax. It is good to see that integrity still exists in the political environment. And every person who sat as an observer should be pleased, just as many are today. Secondly, if one advances a reduction to any expense to others, as has happened to the population of our country, that is a good thing. It was not so long ago that a very familiar government raised value-added tax and saw nothing wrong with increasing expenses. We now have a team that has decreased it, and it is worth applauding and celebrating. If you can help decrease the overall cost of living, fuel, food, utilities expenses, and even the occasional costs associated with recreational well-being, then I say to such administrators, thank you. In a time when wealthy men and women are given so many opportunities to speak on behalf of others, sometimes these individuals need to be reminded that every reduction counts. A single parent or a person that has to stretch every dollar knows the value that this reduction in VAT will bring. Therefore, I will never be accused of minimizing helping the Bahamian population that needs so much assistance. I heard a friend declare that he also saw the report from the University of the Bahamas indicating that the VAT reduction would create a slight improvement, a slight benefit. Let me give a statement on behalf of all of those whose pockets or wallets are not shaped with extra money, that we appreciate the slight improvement. A slight improvement, a slight benefit is the difference between being able to pay a school fee or asking for an extension. A slight improvement is the difference between the average individual putting $10 gas in his car or putting $20 gas in his car. A slight improvement is really the difference between purchasing canned beef off the shelf or a cut of beef from the freezer. So you see, when people speak of a slight improvement, I say I'll take a slight improvement every single time. A slight improvement can be the difference between a home having power on and power being turned off. So let us never minimize the value of a slight improvement. I'm a resident of Grand Bahama, and I can tell you that the previous administrators of the proverbial yesteryears left Grand Bahama neglected and in much need, and you would have heard my colleague mention some of those things. But the thing that is so painful after all of this is how unreasonably high they left unemployment in Grand Bahama. Therefore, Mr. Vice President, I must support every measure of relief and support the reduction in the cost of living at every turn. Simply because Bahamians deserve better, and they are now demanding that their lawmakers demonstrate more care and more concern. Mr. Vice President, the simplicity of a single rate will no doubt cause for a much more efficient collection of that which is due. Plain and simple. We continue to speak of the effects of Hurricane Dorian and the economic fallout that has occurred in our country because of the presence of COVID-19. Many persons laid off or placed on some type of extended non-paid leave, some 17,000 persons who do not have the financial resilience to come back as quickly as we would like, This supplementary budget makes provisions to connect what could be a troublesome Christmas, because the gap between what is needed and what is have is still there. This supplementary budget offers a financial assistance that bridges the gap for many of those persons. And now I must say congratulations to every single recently promoted, scheduled to be promoted public servant, and congratulations to every public servant that is finally confirmed to their assignment. This same supplementary budget gave so many persons benefits that were withheld for varied reasons in the past. But alas, these faithful employees of the people can celebrate the receipt of increments, confirmations, and promotions. I see in what is presented integrity in the fact that what was promised has been delivered. And I conclude by acknowledging that every bit of relief counts at a time when things are not as good as we would all wish it to be. There is something here for every mother, every father, the wealthy or the poor. And yes, something for those thriving towards a better future who deserve every chance to succeed. And as such, we ought to advance for their receipt at every opportunity and do so with vigor. Mr. Vice President, before I take my seat, I would like to also add that at this time in our history, when it seems that we have all become super sensitive about the plight of abused children and women, I want to go on record as saying thank you to every man and every woman that takes a stand against child abuse, relationship abuse, and even neglect. We all, I know, look forward to the day in our history when such atrocities only exist in poetry in the Bahamas. But as for that date, I take comfort knowing that every good and worthwhile journey has a starting point, and certainly our nation has begun the journey to eliminate this most unpleasant element that has been rearing its head in our land. Mr. Vice President, thank you.
Thank you. As many The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Vianna Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Is your mic on?
It should be. Good. Mr. Vice President, it is an honor and a privilege to have another opportunity to rise in this place and to address the supplementary budget put forward by the government for the fiscal year 2021-2022, and with it, the Value-Added Tax Amendment Number 2 Bill 2021. I would like to quickly address the budget and then move to the more critical discussion of the Value-Added Tax Amendment, which I believe carries with it atrocious social injustices. Last night when and I shared this with the Honorable Senator, last night when I realized we would be in here in this chamber with the Honorable Michael Halkitis, Minister for Economic Affairs, I changed my view slightly on the utility of having this budget exercise. Only slightly, Mr. Vice President. We know that it is not necessary to have had a full-blown debate on a supplemental budget to make the changes that were being made. The government has a discretionary power to scale back spending, and the new PFM Act gives them the power to move up to 2%, I believe, the overall capital and recurrent budgets between respective heads to accommodate new priorities. This could have been achieved quickly. The Honorable Minister did not disappoint. He provided valuable insight that we had been waiting on regarding the budget. Mr. Vice President, the speech from the throne was superbly delivered by His Excellency, the Governor General. The content and flow of that speech was like a well-crafted, well-executed Junkanoo parade. Intense rhythms, sustained by a solid back line and supported by drums and cowbells. I like Junkanoo, Mr. Vice President. With a quote, I am a Saxon, so I ain't gonna lie. With the occasional well-timed horn fanfare. Mr. Vice President, if I digress for a second, yesterday in church, Our band in church, we had John Canoe in church yesterday, Silver Bells, and it played over and over. We had cowbells. We had goatskin drums. We had the drummer. Our drummer left the drums to go to the cowbells, and a new drummer went on. We had a good time. I love John Canoe, and I was so happy about it. But let's go back to the budget. The speech from the throne was a fantastical flurry of texture and color choreographed by a master showman, in my opinion. All in all, it was perfectly suited to get one rushing and keep the feet moving to the beat. And the crowds at the opening of Parliament did cheer and dance with joy. Now I'm going to confess that at lunch later that day, one of our own said, hope I don't get in trouble for this one. One of our own said, I don't care what you say about teething our ideas and how they can do that and how they can pay for this. I don't care. It sounded so good. It represented the first real interpretation of the Progressive Liberal Party government's blueprint for change, which the Honorable Minister of Works and Utilities called a social contract between the PLP government and the people of the Bahamas. Mr. Vice President, the Bahamian people were told then there was a need for a supplementary budget to align the priorities promised in the blueprint and forecasted during the speech from the throne. The government couldn't wait for the next fiscal period. I guess you would call this the Rawson Square high point. Change was needed now, and the crowds went wild. A better way forward was promised. Big and transformative change was heralded. The argument was that this supplementary budget reprioritizes what the government termed unnecessary budgeted expenditures to areas where they were most needed. However, Mr. Vice President, a comparison of this supplementary budget to the speech from the throne illustrates the truism, in my view, that all that glitters is not gold. The supplementary budget is like John Canoe with no drums, no horns. Watching speech after speech after speech felt like looking at big, fanciful costumes with too much glitter and feathers, with no music in the belly or lacking or backing in the performance. You know, in my view, no self-respecting, true Bahamian would accept that kind of John Canoe, especially not this close to Christmas, having been denied of it because of our COVID crisis. Mr. Vice President, before I address the issues of concern, I want to acknowledge what I see as positive in the supplementary budget. I was glad some of the members of the side opposite, asked us to do so. I was intending to anyway. But I will take this opportunity. I like to give credit where credit is due. I wish to commend the government for its recurrent expenditure reallocation that has led to an additional $19.6 million being provided for pensions and gratuities and other salary-related matters. Being a former public officer, I'm pleased for any move that benefits the hardworking and dedicated people of the public service. I received an unsolicited message this past week from my brother, who complimented the Honorable Minister of State Pia Glover Rule and wished she and I were on the same side because of his. I can send her a message and tell her, come over here, come over to us, right? But because of his high regard for her, this was his thought. He sent me a WhatsApp. I wish y'all were on the same side. Y'all get some stuff done. I've only interacted with the Honorable Minister of State a few times. I believe her, though, when she said she will work assiduously to provide reform for the public service. As the leader of Her Majesty's loyal opposition, the Honorable Michael Pintard has said, we on this side are available and amenable to assisting in any way possible. Mr. Vice President, I have the greatest respect for the Honorable Minister of Education, Glenys Hannah Martin. I congratulate her on serving this past week as acting Prime Minister, the third female in our nation's history to do so. My immediate view was, it looks good on her. It did. If anyone on that side opposite can lead the way to make meaningful progress in the area of educating our next generation, I believe it is the Honorable Glenys Hannah Martin. As a cautionary note, though, we saw a $2.5 million reduction in the capital budget for the education digitization program. I wish to point out, excuse me, I wish to point out that the education digitization program was a priority of the F&M administration. It was in train when Dorian hit us and allowed our educators to pivot to virtual learning then and exponentially provide virtual learning during COVID-19. We were unable to discover a corresponding increase in budget elsewhere for the education digitization project, and hope that this does not mean that the government has abandoned this critical initiative. We encourage the minister to fight for budgetary resources in future budgets to ensure that this program is not watered down, even if changes are made. And I wondered whether or not the honorable minister did have an explanation as to what happened to that precious 2.5 million.
Yes, I would. I was going to wait for the wrap up because I didn't want to interrupt the honorable senator. But the project has not been abandoned. In the 2020-2021 budget, which was last year, 11,528,000 was budgeted for the project. Up to March of 2021, approximately 4.5 million had been spent, which is about 40% of the budgeted amount. And so this year, 7.5 million was budgeted, and we've revised that to $5 million. And the explanation is we have what we think is a robust digitization project. We are just aligning the budget allocation with what we think will be spent during this fiscal year. So 7.5 was budgeted. We think we will spend out of that 7.5 about 5 million. And that is in line with what had happened in the previous year with 11 million budgeted, but 4.5 million spent. And so I just want to assure that there is a commitment to the digitization, particularly with education, and the fact that we've discovered, and I'm sure all of us have discovered, that, and when I say all of us, I'm talking about those of us who were on the ground during the past few months, that many of our young people, our school children, were without either the instrument to sign into online learning or had the access, and so we must do more. But this exercise is just in the short term to align what we think will actually be spent with the budgeted amount.
Thank you, Honorable Senator, for providing that explanation. And like I said, I'm pleased to hear that the program isn't being scratched because it was so very important. And again, we commit to working with you to continue to advance the program for the benefit of our children through the country. Mr. Vice President, I would like to, I think I moved this over. Yes. I want to talk a little, just for a quick moment, Mr. Vice President, about the issues of priorities. Some of that was talked about this morning in this session and elsewhere in that other place, that there are certain priorities in the blueprint. And it was just, again, a bit of a caution and to flag it here that empowering the youth is identified as one of the government's priorities. However, we saw the minor reductions in the Ministry of Youth's budget where we were anticipating an increase. We talked about the digitization just now in education. However, and we also saw some other slight decreases where we would have been expecting, because these items are being said are priorities, we anticipated seeing in the reallocations increases with a push and strategies to cause more action to take place during this particular period rather than reductions, whether they're minor or not, in any of these areas identified as the government's priorities. Mr. Vice President, I mentioned previously that I have been charged with shadowing the Ministries of Environment and Natural Resources and Transport and Housing. In relation to this particular one, Mr. Vice President, I was particularly concerned, that's environment. The government has carried out what seems like an absolute gutting of the renewable and resilient energy initiatives. I listened to most of the speeches and perhaps I missed it, but there was no explanation provided as it relates to these alternative energy positions. The Minister administration inherited the target of achieving 30% renewable energy by 2030 and made it a key priority of that administration. The F&M government already completed the Ragged Island facility, the Anatole Rogers Initiative, the National Stadium Initiative, started the feasibility and contractual work for the OPM Solar Car Park. Tangible work, Mr. Vice President. You could touch and feel and see it out of the ground, and then allocated additional monies to carry out more work to provide microgrids, for example, on Abaco. Ragged Island is completed. It may not be fully operational, but that is completed and tested and has ran that island. Sorry, Mr. Vice President, I got distracted. Speaking to a requirement for unique and creative approaches to public and private investment to restore our economic health and provide opportunities for employment and growth, the former Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Dr. Hubert Minnis, reported in May 2021 budget communication that his administration had committed to funding $31 million in renewable and resilient energy projects. The new government came with fanfare, raging about climate change and alternative energy and resilient this and resilient that, but guts the budget for projects in process. These budget cuts in such critical areas clash harshly with the dissonance with the speech from the throne. These decisions do not appear to advance the promises uttered by the new administration for saying that this area is a priority in the immediate term. The rude reality of this supplementary budget falls far short of the grandiose speeches with which it was introduced. We see what looks like a cut in the climate resilient coastal management and infrastructure program, a cut to the reconstruction with resilience in the energy sector in the Bahamas program. Most importantly, there was a $9.169 million reallocation of funds for energy restoration and renewable energy. And I understand to some extent the discussion made by the Honorable Minister earlier that some things had been partially through the program and we think that this is how much is going to be spent. But in this particular case, Mr. Vice President, there seems to be a gutting. And if this is truly a priority, one would think that the team would sit, strategize, and figure out how to spend more resources in a shorter space of time in order to cause the priority to be functioned. That's in my view, how priorities are treated. We will be watching to see re-implementation of real funding for renewable energy or alternative energy. On housing, Mr. Vice President, we don't need to stay here long. For all the fanfare of housing this and housing that in the media since the government took office, it does not appear to be one new dime for this so-called priority. In fact, it's clear now that the government has completely thrown the baby out with the bathwater and cut the funding for projects for young professionals that would have been landmark and transformational to that grouping. Providing for this group is obviously not one of the government's priorities. And that's not the disappointing part. That's not the most disappointing part. What is disappointing is that the government criticized this side, criticized us this morning. In fact, I was supposed to not get distracted by that, but criticized us this morning, but has provided no alternative plan, no additional funding to push it through. It is obviously not a priority. Wow. Mr. Vice President, regarding the VAT Amendment Bill number 2, which I think is the most crucial part of the exercise in the past few weeks, I must confess, I don't know sufficient economics to know whether a decrease from 12% to 10 on my own, whether 12% to 10% helps the country in the long run. I know how it makes me feel when I think about financial decisions I have to make, how it impacts all of us collectively and cumulatively in the long term. I have to rely on advice. And I suspect we will find out. I do understand that the F&M administration's fiscal and tax policies prior to Hurricane Dorian were beginning to yield positive results. The Central Bank of the Bahamas reported in its annual report of 2018, published on the 24th of June, 2019, covering the fiscal period July 2018 to June 2019. And I only need to quote the first line for my purposes. The opening statement of the foreword to the bank's report says the Bahamian economy strengthened during 2018. We were on the way before the catastrophe. This seems to directly contradict some propagandists' view about. Mr. Vice President, in all of my years in the public service and meeting and interacting with Brexit institutions, I've never known them to promulgate a tax policy that reduces tax unless another tax is in the wing waiting to be applied. We'll see. What I do know personally is how to take care of people, how to think about the needs of people and to try and meet those needs. I've made a life of it, Mr. Vice President. How to do what the Bible says, care for the poor, the orphans, and the widows. The F&M administration took the decision to reduce VAT to zero for bread basket items, for prescription medicine and other important medicines, for small light bills, small water bills. This VAT bill erodes the protection of the most vulnerable amongst us who can least afford to pay more taxes, especially at this critical time. Protection provided by the F&M government. In my view, this VAT bill, with that single decision to raise any of those no VAT items, is indicative of why the F&M political party will continue to win the hearts and the minds of the Bahamian people. And why those people whose hearts that we have won would rather stay home and not vote than cast their votes elsewhere. This VAT amendment bill is what our elders would call a cry and shame for not considering the poor while it made other considerations. We're not saying throw out the plan to move from 12 to 10, you know. All we're saying is while you're doing that, use some of the brain power and think about how we could have maintained what was being provided at that particular point. And I bet that the majority of the poor believe that the government is never going to search them out to give them the touted direct relief equal to the zero tax relief that they were receiving under the F&M government. Her Majesty's loyal opposition proposed, a lot of chatter, Mr. Vice President. Her Majesty's loyal opposition proposed amendments.
Senator Honorable Viana Gardner has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Her Majesty's loyal opposition proposed an amendment to the government's bill to leave the VAT zero rated for bread basket items. However that is defined. People are debating that point. That's not the issue. The issue is for there to be a basket of goods that people can go to. People who, we're not just saying people who are poor or are considered poor or economically depressed. Anybody who's in need to go to that, that's what we're saying. Allow the zero rated to remain on that. So we don't have to go and stand and get a card or get our name on a special list or get somebody to consider us so we could get the direct relief that's being touted. I heard someone argue, we go to the big boys now since you brought them up. I heard someone argue that it wasn't fair or right that large commercial operations receive the 10%, receive the zero rating on these particular items that we are asking to remain zero rated, Mr. Vice President. The law is a beautiful thing, you know. It is possible to solve almost anything with the law. It's just a matter of writing it, thinking it, conceiving it, and writing it, figuring it out. It is possible to solve for the perceived mischief that is being created, that is thought to be created. The government provides direct relief now for other forms of taxes. We give groups relief, hotels encouragement act, that's one direct set of relief to that group, a direct set of relief to the industries, a direct set of relief to bear manufacturers. That's on customs duties and real property tax and things like that, Mr. Vice President. The point I'm making is that it's possible. It is quite possible to cut out that narrow little space that we're talking about for the vulnerable. The business, we had it at zero. We had it at zero. It worked with our model. The business community, because of who are they not wanting to upset with this, in my view? This is a question, and maybe it'll get answered later. I understand that there's a lot of administrative hardship to do this, and it may cost more to administer than to collect and back and forth. But the point is, if there is a desire to help that group of vulnerable persons, there is a way. and it is able to be crafted. The Honorable Senator, Mr. Attorney General, I'm sure if he sharpened his pencil, he could think of a way to do this, to be able to protect this vulnerable group. Mr. Vice President, regarding direct relief, we are pleased that the government is continuing two forms of direct relief undertaken by the F&M government: provision of unemployment assistance and food assistance. What is not clear, though, in all of the speeches we've listened to and material read is what improvements are going to be made to the RISE program to ensure that people truly in need receive assistance and the specific level of assistance that they do need. Mr. Vice President, in the Blueprint for Change, the PLP made a point to commit itself to SMART goals. That is, goals that are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound or trackable. In that spirit, and as a firm advocate of data-driven decision-making, I invite the government to give the Bahamian people something concrete to measure, not the rhetoric of in this political arena, which is good for riling up partisan elements, but not much more. As you have begun, so you should continue. Tell us what you intend to do. Tell us how and when and where and how much. Tell us when you're going to do what you plan to do, particularly regarding the social assistance, how many people you aim to assist or affect by the direct relief. Tell us how this action or that decisions will benefit specific demographics of Bahamians. Give us the tools to measure the performance. We will easily be able to tell the difference between a painted versus a pasted costume. I want to assure the government that we will test every assumption that the planned budget expenditure was unnecessary, particularly when it's unclear where the reprioritized expenditure is seated. A prime example, how will the public know the $36 million direct relief fund in the Ministry of Finance's line budget is being used fairly and objectively? What assurances do we have that these tens of millions of dollars will benefit the broadest possible pool of Bahamians? Mr. Vice President, in the spirit of big transformational change, I appeal to the government to turn its commitment to SMART goals to the insidious and pervasive problem of violence against women and children. Of particular concern is our persistent culture of silence that surrounds domestic abuse. Of concern also is the propensity of our society to re-victimize the victim. Despite its grave consequences and the seemingly intractable nature of this global issue, violence against women and children is preventable. In fact, the United Nations has a set of recommendations for addressing this violence, one of which is listen to and believe survivors. As a community, we appear to have an unfortunate predisposition to skepticism when it comes to violence against women and children. The first step in truly addressing this issue is for us to be open. When a woman says her story of violence, she takes the first step to breaking the cycle of abuse. We as a community must create safe spaces where she can speak up and be heard. I urge the government not to ignore this problem. And given the comments made by some of the members in that other place, I suspect that attention will be given to this. And I urge the government to reprioritize it away from the glare of the national spotlight. The Honorable Prime Minister contextualized this budget in terms of big transformative change. I call on the government to truly go big, implement SMART goals in its midterm budget and its 2022 budget, and set aside real money for this issue. Mr. Vice President, on 25th of November 2021, marked the launch of the Unite to End Violence Against Women global campaign, 16 days of activism to highlight these social ills. This campaign is led globally by the United Nations Secretary General and United Nations Women, and it will conclude this Friday on the 10th of December. I marched on the 25th of November with civic organizations to say enough is enough, to promote concrete action within our government and community. Standing together were many agencies, including Women United, Zonta, Caribbean Women in Leadership, the Rotary Club, Rise Bahamas on behalf of children, who has recently received its nonprofit status, and many more. It's not a partisan issue. Political parties have been participating together during these past 16 days. There are objectives of the group, and these objectives include changing the laws so that a sexual crime against a child resulting in the child's death is deemed by statute to be the worst of the worst, making the death penalty available to a judge as a sentence. 2, there are only 7. Immediate designation of a court dedicated to solely and expeditiously hear domestic and sexual violence cases. In the interim, a smart goal could be considering strategies to aggressively clear the backlog. I'm glad we're sitting in here with Senator, the Honorable Mr. Attorney General, who can help us with most of this. Number 3, shelters for victims of providing shelters for victims of domestic and sexual abuse. As an easy, smart goal. Decide, perhaps, repossessed houses. Something can just be used and given to these organizations that are working very hard in order to provide shelters for people to go who are in vulnerable situations. 4, publication of the Sexual Offenders Register. The group will continue. I understand that the Honorable Minister of National Security addressed this recently, but this is still a demand, a requirement, a request, and the group would like to work together to find a way to get around this point on a legal basis. Number 5, public counseling services for victims, to provide such counseling services for family members as well as perpetrators of domestic and sexual abuse. 6, to provide child care centers to care for unattended children who are not engaged in face-to-face learning, or for those that need care while their parent or parents are at work. Again, Mr. Vice President, an easy, smart goal. We want to have 5 by June. We want to have 5 by the end of December 2022. Setting a goal and actually working towards that. There's a lot of power in the private sector and amongst the civic organizations that are prepared, if they have a building, to work. And number 7, to immediately pass the gender violence bill. The government should set a goal of developing and introducing further anti-violence coursework as well in the public preschool. And I say further because we know that there is some work already being done in the primary and the high school curricula. This should be given urgent priority, Mr. Vice President. And I challenge the government to set a short deadline for this. Why not mandate that the new course material should be ready for implementation by the start of the next school year? Preventing and ending violence against women and children is possible. Educating, advocating for change, and helping a survivor of violence are just a few of the things that we can do to help end this global pervasive issue. And I think, Mr. Vice President, in the spirit of the Prime Minister wanting to bring about transformational change, that some of these particular issues can be placed in that bucket and identified as priorities, particularly given what is happening in our country right at this moment. And let's use this momentum and this energy, set smart goals, apply, identify budget for it, maybe in the midterm, maybe in the June budget, the annual fiscal budget, and actually put resources to these issues so that we might address them. Mr. Vice President, I stand with Her Majesty's loyal opposition to support the VAT bill, notwithstanding that we have the objection as it relates to, we have our objections as it relates to VAT being applied on bread basket items and prescription drugs. We have actually already received, Mr. Vice President, the consent and agreement of the leader of the government's business here in the Senate to table the amendments again, to move our amendments. Notwithstanding that we were unable to provide sufficient notice, we have consent to do that, and we will do so during the course of today. What we would like, Mr. Vice President, is for the government to seriously consider this. Like we said earlier, for the Honorable Attorney General to sharpen his pencil and make a recommendation as to how we might do this legally. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
As many the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Al Ryan Pindo.
Won't be too bad today. Thank you and good afternoon, Mr. Vice President. Today I rise to support the supplementary budget and the VAT amendment bills, which will reduce the rate of VAT to 10% as we had promised to the Bahamian people. The debate today is demonstrable proof of evidence of the PLP's approach to exercise political integrity and the follow through on the promises made to the Bahamian people during the campaign and a promise of a new day. We promised in our blueprint for change that we would lower the VAT rate to 10%, and we are. We promised a series of policies for the economic reform and rescue of the country. We have created the Ministry of Economic Development to focus on this specific goal. The supplementary budget is a result of the fulfillment of these promises to provide the budgetary support for the new Ministry of Economic Development, led by my colleague, the capable Senator Michael Halkitis. The theme of this debate should be promises fulfilled. Mr. Vice President, when it comes to VAT and tax reform, the prior administration, and frankly, continuing into the policy positions in this opposition, the F&M has had an approach of political mischief and dishonesty. Many would recall when the leader of the opposition, for the first time, the member for Killarney, told the Bahamian people VAT was, and I quote, lazy and irresponsible, implying to the Bahamian people that if elected, he would change it. Well, when he was elected, he did change it. Only 1 year after coming into office, the member for Killarney, as the Prime Minister, increased VAT some 67%, from 7.5% to 12%. That action alone is evidence of political mischief and dishonesty. But we shouldn't be surprised. This is the same person that when in opposition called the sale of Bahamar to its current owner a fake sale and something he would see be reversed. Yet just months after coming to office as Prime Minister, the member for Killarney could be seen partying and celebrating at Bahamar.
Senator Enfield.
Mr. Vice President, to suggest that the former Prime Minister spent time partying and carousing and whatever else at Bahamar is an imputation that ought not be attached to him in this instance. The Senator fully knows there are cause for leaders, prime ministers, inclusive of ministers, to visit these establishments, these organizations. They're invited. And so that, to make that kind of imputation, that's improper. That's improper, man.
I'm not saying the man, he wasn't invited. He was also invited to the opening, which he refused to attend because he called it a fake opening. So, neither here nor there. Increasing the rate of VAT 67% on the Bahamian people wasn't enough for the prior administration. They went on to prostitute the VAT regime by including multiple exemptions and zero rates against the advice of experts, international advice, domestic advice, and best practices. The evidence of this ill-advised decision on how to administer VAT is clear in the recent report of the Auditor General, where as a result of the direct decisions of the former administration.
Senator Enfield has the floor.
Mr. Vice President, I believe member knows better than this. Prostitution is really unparliamentary, and he should withdraw it.
That's fine. The word prostitution's with
You withdraw. He withdraws the word prostitution.
Boy, they touchy today. Mr. Vice President, the evidence of this ill-advised decision on how to administer VAT is clear in the recent report of the Auditor General, where as a result of the direct decisions of the former administration, consumer spending nosedived 34% or $2 billion in the year. And VAT revenues as a result of the increased rate and adjustment in exemptions and zero rated items rose a mere $27 million. The evidence of the prior administration's management of VAT is evident. Let's look at it. You decrease the economy by $2 billion and you raise $27 million. The math makes no sense to anybody who can look at it. But with respect to VAT, that isn't the end of the political mischief and dishonesty of the former administration. The member of Killarney, while Prime Minister, commissioned a review by the IMF of the VAT regime and the consequences of how they have managed the tax and fiscal affairs of the country. Not surprisingly, the IMF came back and recommended with the management of VAT, as the prior administration did, with multiple exemptions and zero-rated categories, that the VAT rate needed to be raised to 15%. Get that? The way they managed the VAT administration of this country would have resulted in having to raise the rate again to 15%.
Point of order.
It's an IMF report.
Senator Hanfield.
That is a report, a study, right? Which never materialized. There's no evidence of that.
What is your point of order? That there's no evidence, but you're pointing out the report?
This member's misleading.
Doesn't exist.
Because the member is suggesting that
Senator-
you have to raise, that even though you won now, would you follow that IMF report?
Mr. Vice President, the point is clear. The former Prime Minister commissioned a report of the International Monetary Fund,
You wouldn't follow that.
the IMF, on the state of affairs
second,
of
Senator
the VAT
Bindo.
regime.
Just to clear your point of order, are you suggesting the report does not exist?
But,
Very clear.
then he has no point of order. He has no point of order. Everything I say is factual. The former Prime Minister commissioned a report from the IMF to study the VAT regime of this country in response to how they were managing it, with multiple exemptions and multiple of zero-rated categories. That IMF report came back with a recommendation to raise the rate to 15%. That's all I said it was.
Sorry, just to rule on the point of order, I think it's clear that he said that the report had the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Vice
Yes.
President. Thank you. Well, in any event, I agree personally with the Prime Minister of this country when he intimated in that other place that IMF report and the consequences of how they administered this VAT regime caused them to call a snap election because they weren't prepared to take that burden on themselves before an election, Mr. Vice President. They needed a new mandate, and in my opinion, it caused the snap election. Not only is this shocking, but the political mischief and dishonesty of the member for Killarney when he says he had no sight of the IMF report. This is the sitting Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas who commissioned the very same report, says he did not receive the report, he did not see the report because he was too busy campaigning, Mr. Vice President. Not seeing the report that he commissioned
A point of order.
is even worse than his other bad decisions.
Senator Binder, Senator Gardner.
For the Honorable Senator.
Sorry, Senator Gardner has the floor, please.
Thank you. Mr. Vice President, for the Honorable Senator to seek to impugn the character of a member of the other place in here by saying that person was dishonest, that member was dishonest, I think it should be withdrawn. It's unparliamentary, Mr. Vice President, to do such a thing.
Member said he didn't see it.
Member said he
I
didn't see it.
never saw the report that I commissioned.
Yes, but you are impugning that it's dishonest.
I think it is dishonest.
It may be your opinion, but
It's
does
my
not
opinion.
necessarily
I
mean
can
that
have that
that it
opinion.
is dishonest.
Not seeing the report that he commissioned is worse than the bad decisions he made as Prime Minister. As such, it is more and more clear that he was not fit for the job. It can't be good governance to say that the Prime Minister of a country can no longer govern and turn his attention to the matters of such important national interest as its tax regime because he was campaigning for an election in which his woeful administration got rolled out. This is the height of political mischief and dishonesty or ineptitude. You choose. Or even worse, it's an insatiable appetite for power no matter what the consequences are to the country. This current opposition with new leadership seems to be following in the same footsteps of the political mischief as the member for Killarney and his former administration. The failed attempt in that other place and apparently in this place as well, to propose an amendment that again would increase zero-rated items and exemptions would have resulted in the same mismanagement of the prior administration of the VAT regime, and it would have resulted in a likely increase in the VAT rate consistent with their own commissioned IMF report. I warn the opposition to take heed to the advice of Mr. Gowan Bowe, where he is quoted in the Tribune of December 1st, 2021, saying the former prime minister and his management of the VAT regime did so, and I quote, naively, with empirical information before him and ignorant of the actual advice given to both the Christie administration and his administration on the most appropriate VAT system. To argue a case not grounded in empirical data is misleading and helpful to educating the population. When political parties make statements without backing them up with some empirical data, it does a disservice to the country. This is exactly what the current leadership of the opposition did in that other place, and exactly what they intend on doing in this place. As Mr. Gowan Bowe went on to say, having a complex VAT system does not benefit the Bahamas. The simpler it is, the better it is. And in his words, KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. But one shouldn't be surprised by the actions of the current leadership of the opposition in that other place. They sat in the cabinet of the former administration. That's why they propose an amendment to the legislation we debate today that would result in an increased rate of VAT. By proposing such an amendment, they have endorsed the failed tax and fiscal policies of the former administration and adopted them as their own. And the opposition here today is planning on doing the very same thing. And then on top of all of this, the member of Killarney has the nerve to tell the Bahamian people, I have said and I quote, I have said repeatedly that I am not an advocate for escalating or increasing taxes. It is my view that the lower taxes are, the more people spend. The more people are going to get involved in the economy and your economy grows. Mr. Vice President, this statement in and of itself, after the election, after being run out of office, after his VAT policies are demonstrably failed, is the height of political mischief. Exactly the opposite of what he and his administration actually did. And seems like the current opposition leadership in that place and in this place endorses the track record of the former administration. As Candia Dames, editor for the Nassau Guardian, wrote, and I'm tabling all of these, they're right here, and I adopt them all as my own. The problem for Minnis and the opposition is that he lacks credibility, and he repeatedly shows himself to be hypocritical as he makes feeble attempts to defend his already rejected record. This New Day government, Mr. Vice President, is making good on its promises, and we're making good on them right away. VAT is being reduced to 10%. We are ensuring a simple, efficient, and effective tax system. See, we fundamentally have a difference, and that's okay. We fundamentally have a difference on the way VAT should be administered. We believe in an easy system to administer at a lower rate of tax, a lower rate on everything, providing greater efficiencies to business, less compliance costs, and confusion. We believe, Mr. Vice President, the proper way to benefit those in need most is not with a complex web of tax exemptions that financially benefit the rich, but to provide direct social assistance to those who need it the most. Governing so that they have the freedom and flexibility to supplement their income to get the items that they need most, not items chosen by a government utilizing complex tax exemptions. Mr. Vice President, it's just a different way of governing. This PLP New Day administration governs in the most efficient way to benefit all Bahamians. The former F&M administrations, whose policies are implicitly and explicitly endorsed by the current opposition, chose to govern in a complex and confusing way that resulted in widespread inefficiencies and provided limited tangible benefit. As Bahamians have spoken loudly, it's a new day in governance. Furthermore, Prime Minister Davis has chosen to govern in an inclusive manner, one that is focused not on petty political mischief and dishonesty, but one that utilizes all talents to ensure that the Bahamas will be a better place for all Bahamians. Rescuing the economy is the #1 item in the 10-point plan in our blueprint for change. The road to recover, rebuild, and revolutionize. Unlike the former administration, the Prime Minister has cast a wide net, regardless of political affiliation, in order to put the best team forward together at all levels to build the economy of the Bahamas. He did so in appointing former F&M parliamentarian, opposition leader, and cabinet minister Loretta Butler Turner to serve as consultant to the Small Business Development Center. As a contributor to the Nassau Guardian, Ms. Sharon Turner pointed out, her appointment by Prime Minister Philip Brave Davis also highlights, while not a new undertaking in Bahamian politics, the value to nation building that is imparted by governing under the philosophy of inclusion despite one's political affiliation. As one who was personally cast away when he tried to contribute to nation building under the former administration, I can assure you that today is certainly a new day. The Prime Minister described our approach to nation building rather eloquently when he said, and I quote, "At the end of the day, I want all Bahamians, whether they be Black, white, F&M, or PLP, to be comfortable with whichever government is in place. We need all hands on deck for the challenges we face today. And I am thinking of the best and the brightest out there, regardless of their colors, meaning red or yellow, black or white." He goes on to say, in my cabinet, you can see from females to those traditionally UBP, and that being the United Bahamian Party, persons, and traditionally UBP persons, and that's the way we want to do it. I'm getting there shortly. My government is truly going to represent the Bahamas, its demographics, with the attitudes and varying perspectives on life. Our strength is in our diversity as opposed to allowing it to separate us and dividing us. I want our difference to build us. That's the message of the Prime Minister of this great land. I am so proud of my friend and Prime Minister Philip Brave Davis. With these mature and politically responsive comments followed through by immediate action. I have known the Prime Minister for quite some time, and he is one of the most inclusive, non-judgmental, honest, and genuine people I know. And I am very proud of how he is governing the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. This is the most inclusive government that I could recall. But I just want to clarify one thing. He certainly could not have been talking about me when he said he had those traditionally UBP persons in his cabinet. I have to investigate that. My father took bold and courageous steps to bridge racial divide in this country and suffered the consequences gladly and bravely. UBP, we are not. In the debate on the supplementary budget, I think the correct and the transparent thing, especially as a minister of the government, is to speak to some of the significant anticipated expenditure and projects that we have for the remaining of this fiscal year. It is of note the recurring budget, expenditure budget in the Office of the Attorney General remains unchanged. Now, my good friend here reduced my capital budget from $1.25 million to $800,000. But as described below, we have some big projects and could utilize the capital budget originally budgeted, but we understand the challenges before us and we will make do with what my good friend says we have to. The focus of the capital expenditure for the remaining of this fiscal year will primarily be on the upgrade and move of the Registrar General Department, as well as the Freedom of Information Unit. Both of these institutions contribute greatly to the open and transparent functions of government and towards the ease of doing business and the social activities of our great country. Both institutions will move from their current locations that are deficient for each of their current operations. Both the Registrar General Department and the Freedom of Information Unit will move into a purpose-renovated space in the Bahamas Financial Center. This would allow for a professional working environment with the space and accommodations to properly service the public at large. I think it appropriately to note, though, that the Financial Center space was secured in January of 2021 by the former government and the Attorney General. However, this space was never utilized, nor was it renovated to accommodate the move. All year long, they've been paying for that. 1 year of vacant possession at the cost of the Bahamian taxpayer. We will ensure that the leased space is occupied with a new and cutting-edge delivery of services from the Registrar General Department and the Freedom of Information Unit. Necessary expenditure from our budget this year will be for the continued digitization project for the Registrar General Department. The functions of the RGD are imperative not only for the social welfare of the country with marriages, births, deaths, and other necessary registrations, but is also the backbone of an effective commercial delivery unit, being the department responsible for everything company and entity related. That's both domestically and internationally. For too long, the functions of the RGD have been plagued by inadequate facilities, technology that doesn't function appropriately, service delivery issues, and a lack of organization and maintenance of orderly files and documentation. These vexing pardon me? Well, after I tell you what we're going to do, everybody in the entire country can utilize the services from sitting right behind their computer. These vexing issues are currently in the process of being remediated by the move to new facilities and the development of a purpose-built online platform for the delivery of these vital functions. The government has retained a firm to develop an online platform for the RGD that will be modeled after the successful RGD platform of the Cayman Islands, allowing for the delivery of services to all parties online and in as expedited a fashion as possible. This will go a long way to improving the ease of doing business. We also believe that the efficient administration of justice is not only a necessary obligation to the Bahamian people, but likewise will also significantly contribute to the ease of doing business and international perception of a place where people feel comfortable doing business. I have been working with the Chief Justice and other members of the bar to identify the way forward in this regard. In the first instance, it is a consensus that a series of specialty courts is required, not only for the proper administration of justice, but also in order to ensure the efficiency we all deserve is in place. This is a rather involved process as suitable facilities need to be identified and retrofitted appropriately. And then the operational implementation must be rolled out. During the remaining part of this fiscal year, we have committed to review appropriate locations. And this review in the first instance is a review of current locations the government has under lease that they're not occupying. And unfortunately, Mr. Vice President, that list is rather long. We are looking to find suitable locations for the following specialty courts. The first is a juvenile court, a family court, a sexual offenses court, and a commercial court. Now you could imagine that each one of these types of specialty courts require different types of facilities. A commercial court, for example, can be handled in, for example, the financial center, whereby a juvenile court needs more security, more cell blocks and the like, because unfortunately, many of our juveniles who are brought before the courts are violent offenders. And certainly you need the privacy and discreetness for a sexual offenses court. So all of these courts require different types of facilities and structures and planning and retrofitting. But we are looking to identify suitable locations in the first instance to be able to roll this out and to do so during the remaining term of this fiscal year. We're going to seek the necessary technical advice in their establishment, and seek the necessary legislative amendments necessary to make them happen. Hopefully in the first quarter of 2022, you'll see a compendium of amendments to different judicial pieces of legislation that will support these efforts in expediting access to justice. This is, in my opinion, and the opinion of others, is a fundamental element of increasing the effective and efficient delivery of justice in our country. So, Mr. Vice President, in conclusion, I want to commend the Prime Minister and Senator Halkitis in advancing the mandate given to us by the Bahamian people in an expedited manner. These are important and vital steps to the proper administration for the government and providing a stimulus for the turnaround of our economy and country. It is very clear, Mr. Vice President, that this PLP administration doesn't only talk, but we also walk. And frankly, we walk briskly. I hope the opposition can keep up. We'll all lose weight together. We are delivering on our promises to the Bahamian people just as we are expected to do. We will continue to deliver on our promises throughout our administration, wasting no time in doing so. I am sure I speak for my colleagues when I say we are all on board with the commitment to deliver a new day for the Bahamian people. Mr. Vice President, in conclusion, I support the bills before us. Thank you very much.
As many.
Always.
I thank you, Honorable Senator.
The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Maxine Seymour.
That wasn't me.
I wondered if you had something to do with that. I see you full of mischief today, so I don't know. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I have to say that so far this debate has been quite high in energy and as demonstrated exactly by the most recent contributor who took all that energy to, misguide us in some way because he knows very well that they too on their side have received many reports from many experts over the years. And that doesn't mean that because they recommend something, we would automatically adopt it. And I feel as if our former Prime Minister said multiple times that he had no intention at all in increasing VAT to 15% and putting that burden on the Bahamian people. But nonetheless, the theatrics were pretty entertaining, and I appreciate the Honorable Senator for his performance there. Mr. Vice President, I rise to contribute on the debate on the Supplementary Appropriation 2021-2022 Recurrent Account Expenses Bill 2021, the Supplementary Appropriation 2021-2022 Capital Account Expenses Bill 2021, and the Value Added Tax Amendment Number 2 Bill 2021. Before I get into it, last week was Disability Awareness Week, Mr. Vice President, by proclamation of the Honorable Prime Minister and in alignment with the United Nations International Day for Persons with Disabilities, which is observed each year on December 3rd. So on Friday past, I had the privilege of attending a Jolly Extravaganza dinner and show, an annual event hosted by the Training Center for the Disabled. It was outdoors at the National Arts Gallery, and they did a good job maintaining health and safety protocols. At this same event, the inaugural Disability Icon Awards were presented, and I want to take a moment to congratulate all of the winners of those awards. Mr. Vice President, I want to put in a plug here for the...
Sorry, one moment. Senator, the Honorable Maxine Seymour has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. So I want to put a plug in for the Training Center for the Disabled because they produce everything a lady needs to go to church or get fancy, everything except the dress. They make corsages and handkerchiefs, handbags, amazing headpieces, and they were all modeled on Friday. They even make floral arrangements, and they were the centerpieces on the table at this event. It was just a beautiful event and a reminder that we have to continue to create a Bahamas for all Bahamians, in particular with emphasis on marginalized groupings. And persons with disabilities are very talented, and I witnessed firsthand this talent as they sang and modeled and danced. And in fact, which was quite intriguing for me, I met a gentleman who has a bionic arm. And I guess with my daughter being a Marvel fan, it was quite interesting. And of course, I'm not suggesting for a moment that there's any replacement for a real arm, but Stephen showed me up close how his bionic arm works and the different modes and the way the fingers bend and point. And, you know, technology is really advanced to help persons with disabilities live normal lives, as close to normal as possible. And I look forward to many more persons being able to get such body parts to help them through their journey. I have to say that Ms. Gray was there. I met her. She's the family and consumer sciences teacher at Government High School. And her students were there doing community service, looking sharp in their black and white, serving everybody. And I think they have a bright future ahead. So I look forward to dining at their restaurants and living in their hotels that they own one day. I had a really good time, Mr. Vice President. There was Slick Vic, the DJ, and the motion band, the Luca Boys, Junkanu group was there. And I'll tell you, we had an energetic mistress of ceremony by the name of Latoya Smith. And she didn't stop until she twisted the arms of one of the guests. And so we had a special performance by Sweet Emily herself. And so I am happy to have reserved my tickets already for next year. And I encourage you all to do the same. And hopefully in 2022, I have a privilege again of sitting at a table with Bahamian icon Sheila Culmer or some other person. It was a very humbling evening. And as the minister, shadow minister for social services, I'm very happy that I would have attended. Mr. Vice President, since we last met, my party, the Free National Movement, held a one-day leadership convention. 3 valiant men, all confident, capable, and competent, vied for the top post. The Honorable Michael C. Pintard emerged the winner and has since been appointed as the leader of Her Majesty's loyal opposition. I want to publicly pledge my commitment to working with our new leader as we seek to rebuild our party, reconnect with F&Ms, and reignite the torch to ensure that it continues to shine brightly. I want to also commend members of Parliament, Aram Lewis and Kwesi Thompson, for their stellar campaigns. And finally, I want to thank our immediate past leader for his continued contribution to our great party and to the Bahamas. Mr. Vice President, the holidays are here, and what has become an almost national tradition, the carnival is here. Or is it? Apparently, some of us see it, but others of us don't. Perhaps it's an illusion, Mr. Vice President. Maybe we want it to be here, although it has not quite been approved yet. Or has it? I don't know. It's all quite confusing, and I personally can't keep up. What I do know is that I have visited the carnival on multiple occasions over the years. And just as the young kids are excited to ride the merry-go-round and enjoy the other rides, as long as they're tall enough, you should see them checking out their height by the rulers. The adults are equally excited to play those games because the carnival operators, they try first. Come on. They throw the ball in and they just tell you how easy it is. It's an illusion in some ways, Mr. Vice President. And so I see adults standing there, ball after ball, trying to get it in the hoop, coin after coin, tossing away their money, dart after dart, just trying to hit the target, mallet after mallet, unaware that the games can possibly be rigged and not realizing that their efforts will most likely be fruitless. That is because the operators create these illusions by demonstrating how easily the task could be achieved. Harry Houdini, David Copperfield, and David Blaine are all well known as some of the world's greatest illusionists and mind manipulators. But beyond entertainment, Mr. Vice President, illusions and manipulation techniques are used to control and direct us every day. Mind manipulation is an art that is used by the media, marketers, newsmakers, and yes, by politicians and leaders on occasions. While they get us to focus, Mr. Vice President, on the right hand, they're moving something with the left. Just like that, the trick is complete. Let's not fall to the illusion they try to create to say that they are doing more and better for the Bahamian people. For generations, the PLP party has managed to convince the people of our country that they are the party for the people. They've created this illusion of sorts that they are the party and the only party that cares for the people and who looks out for the poor and disenfranchised in our country. This New Day government is employing the same old misnomer that they have perpetrated for years. The spin doctors in the PLP party continue to position themselves as the ones who look out for the masses. But as with any good illusionist, Mr. Vice President, who understands that the human mind can only focus on one thing at a time, they're using this VAT amendment bill to promote a reduction to 10% to help us all while underplaying the reintroduction of VAT on breadbasket items. Any good illusionist understands that the human mind can only focus on one thing at a time. So right now, while everyone is focused on the reduction from the 12 to 10%, Mr. Vice President, which fundamentally I have no challenge with because it benefits the people. But my question is, what is the government's plan to make up the shortfall? This new administration, with its stated plans to bring in more than $540 million in additional taxes by 2023-24, needs to tell the Bahamian people, what is the real tax plan? We demand that the government stop distracting us and come clean on its tax plans. The Minister administration had proposed a full tax study and a white paper for public discussion and determination on the way forward for tax reform. We had indicated that we wanted to move to a more progressive tax system that reduced the relative tax burden on the poor. You see, while some may just be focused on the right hand, Mr. Vice President of the government, the opposition is here with all our eyes wide open, and we're looking out for the misdirection. You see, it's as if they are leveraging the art of magic, misdirection, getting the audience to focus on what it is that they want them to focus on. Focus on the reduction of VAT by 2% and not the addition of VAT to breadbasket items. It's like a hologram. You see it and you think it's there. Lower taxes, 2% savings, but it's not really there, Mr. Vice President. On the one hand, the public will save some money, but then they will have to use the money saved to pay extra for breadbasket items, medicine, baby food, and baby diapers. All prescription medication and most over-the-counter medication are now VAT-free. Mr. Vice President, but the magicians are about to make that zero rating disappear, replacing it with a tax surcharge of 10%. The government has been quite crafty in making this about corned beef, but it is about diapers for babies and adults. It is about pureed carrots and apples for the little ones. By the way, we would be the first to admit, as my honorable colleagues have done, that the breadbasket list needs some amending. In fact, we have laid the groundwork for that to happen, and we call upon this administration to adopt our recommendations. The Health Ministry has worked diligently to lay the foundation for reshaping the breadbasket list. So the New Day government needs to stop going on about this and about that and pointing fingers and just fix it. Make it healthier. Help reduce the incidences of non-communicable diseases and obesity among our population. That's what governments do. Governments don't conjure up falsehoods of an opposition who simply wants to feed lower income earners in the population corned beef. By the way, Mr. Vice President, people all over this country eat corned beef in moderation. Some of the same people who own properties valued at over $2 million eat corned beef. Mr. Vice President, they do it. Some of them gourmet style with cabbage in it, sometimes potatoes, colored peppers, you name it. Canned corned beef is not just a delicacy over the hill. And the illusionists, they know that. They know that with its long shelf life and high protein and versatility, people everywhere eat it. But I digress. The point is that too much of anything is not good for you. And the now zero-rated breadbasket list includes more than just corned beef. Corned beef is just smoking mirrors. That's all it is. There are 23 categories of goods contained in the breadbasket list that took effect on August 1, 2018, that come January, we will be taxed 10% on. Milk, grits, canned fish, tomato paste, rice, even the healthy rice like brown rice, all about to be taxed. Powdered detergent to wash our clothes, Mr. Vice President. Soap to bathe our skin. Bread, Mr. Vice President, bread about to be taxed. Even Jesus ate bread. He multiplied it to feed a crowd. He broke it with his disciples. Before Jesus' time even, God fed the Israelites manna, which was bread from heaven. There are so many types, and it's a basic staple, whether you're in Europe or in the Caribbean. Whether you pay $3 at a mom and pop store in the historic Brain and Grantstown community, or $12 a loaf at a fresher market in the far west. The Minnis administration said no VAT for you, and the Davis administration says you have to pay VAT. Imagine VAT on the Last Supper, Mr. Vice President. Our Lord may not have been able to feed all 12 of his guests after having to cough up 10% for VAT, which would have been so unnecessary. The brave among us have created this narrative of being committed to the poor, that if I didn't know better, I would believe it myself, because they can be so convincing with the hat and the rabbit and the wand. They have twisted the facts, Mr. Vice President, to suggest that the F&M party looks out for the elites and that our policies and programs while in administration are not poor-centric, which couldn't be further from the truth. But they want everyone to focus on their right hand, Mr. Vice President, while they do business with the left. They want us to look at the 2% reduction on VAT, but ignore the 2% cost savings that they insist the ultra-rich keep in their pockets to manicure their lawns. Never mind, people dream of owning homes in the Bahamas. Never mind, the high end of the real estate market was booming, and the 12% didn't slow down the purchases at all. Never mind, the Real Estate Association was okay with the 12% tax on high-end real estate on values of over $2 million or more that the Minnis administration put in place. Mr. Vice President, in speaking of the hotels and restaurants, the Honorable Senator, my good friend Pickstock, suggested that those who could pay more should pay more. Yet the braver ones still decided to cut the tax on millionaires and billionaires buying homes valued over $2 million. Only wealthy Bahamians and wealthy foreigners buy homes for $2 million or more. I know it's certainly not on my holiday shopping list. So why would the government say thanks, but no thanks to additional revenue, when even with the new 12% tax in place, wealthy persons who have the means were not deterred? Oh, I know. Let the vulnerable play. It's the illusionist is saying, the vulnerable, they already know how to be broke anyway. So what's an extra 10%? Poor people good at being broke. How could the government cut the 12% rate on luxury homes to save the ultra-rich money while imposing a new tax of 10% on medicine? Medicine, Mr. Vice President, for struggling Bahamians, kids who have allergies and asthma, parents who get infections sometimes, need antibiotics, or have headaches and need painkillers. How is it, Mr. Vice President, that at the start of last month, value-added tax was removed from certain basic food items in Trinidad and Tobago, but at the start of next month, they will be added to certain items in the Bahamas? Earlier, one of our honorable colleagues commented that people on social media and talk shows are playing economists, and that this whole budget and VAT rate increase, they think they know everything. It is this mentality that leads the PLP to think that the addition of VAT on breadbasket items is irrelevant and immaterial. Bahamians are smart and astute people, Mr. Vice President, even the ones who the good senator thinks don't understand. Maybe they don't understand high finance, but they understand kitchen table issues and making ends meet. They understand 100% increase in VAT on the corned beef that Senator Russell says he marched against. Corned beef with a little grits or rice or bread on the side to go with it. Many cannot afford two meats, salmon and chicken. That's not for everybody. Have you gone to the store to buy corned beef recently? It's not cheap, colleagues. These armchair economists know that the little bit of money they make will not go as far as it did, so they can't afford cream this week for the low-cost cereal brand they will have for dinner tonight. They know that because the PLP government wants to have them pay for the many trips and luxuries of the PM and ministers and their set, that they will have to have water with a little sugar in it to stretch instead. You know, first class is expensive, Mr. Vice President. I wouldn't know personally, but so I've been told. Bahamians know how to stretch a dollar. And they know if they have to pay VAT on an item that was previously VAT-free, they have less money to buy a new pair of shoes, books, medicine, see the doctor, or maybe even upgrade their skills. But even as you tax these items that may be immaterial to your middle class or wealthy family.
Point of order. Senator Bixlock.
Vice President, you know, the good member is, in my view, impugning the character of the administration who is doing the business of the government. And so I think it's inappropriate to do that when the Prime Minister and the ministers are about the business of the country. And so, you know, if you're minded, you know, you should withdraw that statement.
Mr. Vice President.
Would you like to respond, Senator
I
Seymour?
absolutely would, because, you know, there's a popular saying that says, who the cat fits, wear it. And really and truly, in order to do the people's business, that one airplane is going the same place, whether you're sitting in first class or economy class. And so the preference to sit in first class has nothing to do with what the purpose of the trip is all about.
I rise
Senator
on another
Bixlock.
point of order. Do you have evidence before you to suggest how the PM is flying?
Yeah, they always fly first class. That's common knowledge.
No, but I mean, you must have some evidence.
Senator Seymour, do you have evidence of the travel preferences of the Prime Minister?
So, Mr. Vice President, at this moment, I won't be able to pull up any of the photos, and I didn't just say the Prime Minister, I did say the ministers. I don't have an immediate access to the photo of anyone lounged away in first class with the pillows and the blankets over them.
So would you like
I
to
don't
withdraw
have-
that statement until you can provide evidence?
Actually, sir, I did say for the many trips and luxuries. I did not say the class until he raised it, and I pointed out that the airplane goes the same place no matter where you sit. But I didn't point out a particular class. And so my question is, does the PM and the ministers, do they fly and go on trips, yes or no? Maybe the good honorable senator who raised the point of order could tell me whether or not they go on trips at all. Because I'm saying you're asking me to withdraw it, but I didn't point
Can you
out.
direct your statements to the chair?
Mr. Vice President, my statement said that the PLP government is paying for trips and luxuries of the PM and minister, and that's what I said. And luxuries are anything, even if they have nuts. Nuts is a luxury, just for the record, Mr. Vice President.
So going along with the point of order, do you have proof of the luxuries that they sustain on their travel?
I don't have proof of the luxuries, sir.
Would you like to withdraw the statement
I would
until you
like
can
to
provide?
withdraw the statement until I can provide proof of the luxuries.
Sustained.
Thank you, sir. You know, even as the PLP administration taxes these items that may be immaterial to the middle class or wealthy family, the vulnerable class is making serious life and death decisions on how they will compensate for this extra 10%. They're not worried about how they may be able to afford a new TV or buy their child a bicycle this Christmas. They are trying to figure out how they will make their $210 minimum wage salary stretch so they can afford an additional 10% added to their food bill and still keep the electricity on, Mr. Vice President, still keep the water flowing and the rent covered. Thank God that the government kept the exemption for electricity in place, which in a way I don't get because they seem to be anti-exemptions. But anyway, I'm happy they kept that in place. Never mind all that, Mr. Vice President. They want us to look into their eyes and see the 2% reduction so we don't notice the 10%. They want us to pay the price to attend their circus. The universal system of 10% across the board is being created to help the government in the convenient and consistent collection of taxes. So our ticket to the show, Mr. Vice President, as everyday Bahamians, is to pay the price to make the government's job easier. For those of us who can't identify with what 10% on bread basket items means, For those of us who are not friends, lovers, or cronies with lucrative appointments, they should just ask the PLP's buddy, Buju Banton. He can tell them it's not an easy road. And many see the clamor and glitter, so then think it better rose. Who feels it knows. Oh Lord, help the Bahamian people to sustain these blows. The Bahamian public was told that the Davis administration would be ready to govern on day one. Was that another illusion? Now, in fairness, I don't know how the PLP administration counts their days, because its mercies are new every morning. So perhaps day one isn't here yet, because they start counting from one with each sunrise. All I do know is that while I did not vote for Parliamentary Secretary Backer's role, I expected to benefit from free COVID testing for all. How long are we to accept that the program is being piloted here and piloted there? When is this day one gonna be that they're gonna be ready on?
Point of order, Mr. Vice President.
Senator Ryan Pindo.
I think the Minister of Health has been rather clear in that widespread free testing is intended to be rolled out in the first quarter of 2022 after a successful pilot program, especially through the Family Islands, which is the most difficult area to contain pockets of the pandemic of COVID-19, where free testing was proof that that is how you get the proliferation of the pandemic under control in small clusters. We went to Inagua. We rolled out free testing for all of Inagua, and that cluster was identified and extinguished. The same was done in North Eleuthera, where the clusters were identified and extinguished. This is how you do things responsibly. You roll out pilot programs in areas of the most need to demonstrate the effectiveness, and then on a national scale, you roll it out thereafter. I think certainly the Minister of Health has been rather clear in this regard. So for you to stand up and say that we have no clear plan, nor have we advised the Bahamian people what we are intending to do with free testing is rather disingenuous. And I would ask the member to please withdraw that conclusion.
Like to respond, Senator Seymour?
Since the good senator came to the conclusion about the not having a plan, I will certainly withdraw that. But what I will not withdraw is the fact that the black and blue, or is it blue? A blueprint, right? Said that on day one, they would be ready to govern. And I don't know the math between September 16 and today, but I do know that many day ones have passed. I didn't remember reading about the pilot part of the program, but nonetheless, I'll wait patiently until the first quarter of next year to have my free testing. And I really do hope that it's the PCR testing, because that's the more reliable, Just last week, a couple went to get tested to travel to the US, Mr. Vice President. The wife came back negative and the husband was positive. They did rapid antigen tests, okay? And they were questioning why would the husband be positive if the wife is negative? So they decided to retest. And when they retested, the husband was negative. Now there's an error margin in everything. But all I'm saying is that if the government is going to give its people something, they should want to go by the gold standard. And as far as I'm aware, PCR testing, whether that's with COVID, HIV, or anything else, is more accurate than the rapid testing. Nonetheless, I'm not a health professional, Mr. Vice President, and so I'll move on from there and just wait for Q1 of next year for the free testing, and we'll see what that looks like. I don't know the exact plan, but I will hope that the good senator will provide it for me. Just point me in the direction, Honorable Senator, and I'll be more than happy to do so. Mr. Vice President, we have to keep our eyes open. We have to be on the lookout for everyday illusions. We have to watch both hands, Mr. Vice President, because when the Honorable Senator, Lightborn, in the one-story house with enough food to share, talks about record levels of borrowing close to $1 billion in a year and blames the Minister administration for neglecting critical expenditure, watch the left hand. He may be trying to hide the memories of a caring and compassionate government who implemented food assistance programs, employment programs, business recovery support, sourced PPEs, paid for contact tracing and quarantine, paid to fly Bahamians home who were stuck abroad. Watch the left hand, Mr. Vice President, because they say, oh, where is it to show? We haven't seen any infrastructure. They know very well from they were in primary and high school how the digestive system works, Mr. Vice President. And it would be difficult to source the proof of what happened to sustain Bahamians living in our country for 18 months. I don't have any boots to go through the sewers, Mr. Honorable Senator. So feeding people, sustaining them, paying people in the public service, continuing salaries, helping when it really counts, caring for the citizens is not something that's going to show up in a school or a park, and they know that very well. So watch both hands, Mr. Vice President. Even though we were faced with a catastrophic unplanned storm and pandemic, both exceeding any crisis of their kind in history, we had to fund home repair, food assistance, employment programs, business recovery support, but we still managed to gift the not-so-new government with an economy that S&P and Moody's has asserted is growing faster than initially projected, with real economic growth for this year on course to double the original forecast. Thanks to the previous administration, our country's first quarter results reflect revenues that are ahead of budget projections by 90 million. The facts are that when we left, unemployment was on the decline, Mr. Vice President. Economic activity was on the rise. Investments were being made, and revenues were higher than projected. The government ought to strongly consider continuing the studies on fiscal and tax reform, which are critical, especially post-pandemic. Let's consider what is needed to develop a truly progressive tax system. We don't need an old tax system in a new day. And dropping it by 2% on the one hand, while reintroducing VAT on breadbasket items on the other, and this time at 10%, is not sustainable. It's not a sustainable solution for our tax challenges. Expand the breadbasket list. Leave the items that are currently exempted VAT-free. Stop playing tricks on us. Stop insulting our intelligence. Let the funds from the ultra-rich and the extra 2% on sales over $2 million help to build parks and paint schools. The realtors don't mind, and neither do the purchasers. So why is it that the magicians are attempting to entertain themselves by making potential revenue disappear from our treasury? Those same funds can replace the $2.5 billion being cut from education's digitization project in this budget. Even if the new hire started late, the Minister of Education bemoaned the state of schools, so surely she could have repurposed that money to help get those schools ready for January. Why cut money from education and youth and sports with the right hand while sliding an extra 2% back into already deep pockets with the left? Those same funds from the 12% on property sales over $2 million can go into our young people who are this country's future. Yet $1.9 million has been cut from the recurrent budget of youth, sports, and culture. Even though there's no Junkanoo and government has no immediate use for all the extra funds. And even though they didn't have sports programs, I'm sure the Honorable Minister Bolag could use that to help pay to prepare for the Bahamas Games being planned as the Golden Jubilee Games to coincide with our 50th anniversary of independence in 2023. Mr. Vice President, watch both hands, because there are illusionists out there and they want you to focus on what it is that they want you to focus on. You know, I already withdrew my point, but here it is. What I can say is that one day when I grow up, I would like to travel first class because it looks quite comfortable. An individual television and pillows and blankets looks comfy. I have only get economy. I can't even stretch out my legs, Mr. Vice President. No room, no room, no room. So, Mr. Vice President, I want to say that I support the reduction on VAT, but I cannot support the removal of zero VAT rating on breadbasket items. Similarly, I cannot support the refund to the rich on sales property on the sales of properties over $2 million. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
As many The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Michael Halkitis.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. And I rise to briefly make some comments as I wrap up this debate. I want to begin by thanking all senators for their contributions. I think we had a robust debate. It's a very compelling topic, not only the supplementary budget, but the VAT amendments. And to quote a senator who spoke earlier, I think we all want the best. We just have different views in how we get there. I want to just repeat one paragraph from my presentation, Mr. Vice President. Yes, grits, rice, flour, tomato paste, soap, powdered detergent, mustard, mayonnaise, milk, flour, cooking oil, corned beef, canned fish, cheese, butter, bread, baby formula, baby food, baby cereal, and sanitary items, and baby diapers. They're very important, but also important, chicken, pork chop, turkey wing, ribs, lamb chop, ham, salt beef, peas, beans, sausages, egg, hot dog, tomatoes, onion, cabbage, Irish potato, sweet potato, carrots, broccoli, mixed vegetable, corn, lettuce, celery,
Senator Alkitis has the floor.
spaghetti, noodles, sugar, cornflake, oatmeal, tea bag, coffee, Milo, sweet pepper, soda, juice, Gatorade, Vitamalt, ice cream, cookies, chip, lime juice, salt, seasoning, foil paper, sandwich bag, garbage bag, Joy, Ajax, pot scrubber, flit, chicken snack, count snack, meal deal, lotion, shampoo, shoes, tennis, socks, shirt, pants. When you go to the gas station, you go to the hardware store, you go to the restaurant if you can afford it, medical insurance. If you go to the fabric store, you go to the homeware store, commercial rent, all of those things, VAT will go from 12% to 10%. So the point I make by reading those exhaustive lists, Mr. Vice President, is that what is going down, VAT going down on thousands upon thousands of items and services, Mr. Vice President. And albeit, yes, those bread basket and a few other items will no longer be zero rated, but it is our belief that when you take everything in its entirety, that the net effect would be a savings for the Bahamian people. And that is why, a significant savings. That is our belief. And that is why we do what we do. Mr. Speaker, I also want to say, I want to quote from a Trinidadian consumer as quoted in the Trinidad Guardian newspaper about VAT being taken off of some food items in Trinidad. It was referenced in the debate. And he says, this is the Trinidad Guardian newspaper dated October 31st. I thought it was funny. He says, and in many respects, it coincides with our experience. He says, quote, pigtail nice to flavor dishes, but the removal of VAT and making it cheaper might make people overuse it and cause and increase their cholesterol problem. Yes. Yes. And so we get to the point of making revisions to the bread basket to include more healthy items. And I think that is a positive contribution and something that should be explored. But the overriding point, Mr. Vice President, is that with a tax such as VAT, the best model, the most efficient model, the model that will yield the best results in terms of revenue and the security of a revenue, is to keep it with minimal exemptions and to keep one rate. There is some compelling points made, and I would like to say at this point, Mr. Speaker, that I think the points were made out of concern. Senator Raming had a very interesting point about a bread basket sanctuary. He says if worse comes to worse, it would be a city of refuge and we can get some relief. And he spoke about reforming the tax system so that the rich pay more, called the progressive taxation, and asked about the 15% minimum corporate tax that is being advanced by the OECD and how we will address this. Senator Seymour made mention of the tax study and what is the future of the tax study to look comprehensively at our entire tax system. And I can say that that is being continued. And what we have decided to do is look at it not only within the context of the 15% global minimum tax and how that would affect our offshore, but looking at it within the whole context of our entire tax system. And this includes discussion to look at the feasibility of moving away, for example, from the business license fee to a corporate tax system, even if you implement a corporate tax for the bigger business and keep the business license fee in place for the smaller businesses. All of those things are being studied and are being considered. As was stated before, and Senator Gardner raised it in her contribution, in terms of the Ministry of Youth, a reduction. This because of the 1.4 million that was previously allocated for Junkanoo that will not be spent. Another, that was 1.4 million and another 0.5 million, which was the sum of some other small reductions. Senator Gardner also raised the point of the 30%, the commitment of the 30% to get 30% of our energy from renewables by 2030, and that is a commitment that we also share. Notwithstanding, in the short term, it might seem that some projects have stalled a bit. It's not because of lack of commitment, but sometimes we have problems with execution. But there is that commitment for 30% by 2030. Senator Gardner also asked how do we make up the difference by cutting VAT from 12 to 10, and whether new taxes are in the wings, and we can emphatically say no new taxes are in the wings. Senator Seymour, in her contribution, asked, what is the real tax plan? How do we make it up? And I can say confidently that our tax plan is as follows. We're reducing VAT to 10% across the board. We think that would have a stimulative effect on the economy. People have more money left in their pockets to spend. We have reconstituted the Revenue Enhancement Unit, as I said, to make sure that those who can afford to pay and who owe government, revenue is collected from them. We are aggressively pursuing economic growth. We have recast and reformed the National Economic Council with the goal of dealing with foreign investment projects, applications in a more timely manner by streamlining their work. And we will be focusing on ease of doing business and supporting Bahamians getting into business by making it easy and removing bureaucracy. And we are studying and investigating new revenue sources. So we are looking at the whole idea of carbon credits and monetizing carbon credits. That discussion is in its infancy, but this is one of the things we are investigating. You'd recall that 2 terms ago, or 2 PLP administrations ago, we studied and we were planning, and it took about 10 or more years to get the overflight fee system in place where we can begin to collect fees, and that has come to a fruition. So one time ago, that seemed far-fetched, but it has come to fruition, and we think that the same might be the case for being able to access funds through carbon credits, etc. The question was raised by Senator Seymour about the reduction of 2% on high-end properties as well. That is I want to say first that there is no refund to refund in the sense of giving money back to anybody in turn, wealthy homeowners. That is a provision that came into effect this year. I think it was around the middle of the year, so we don't have a lot of experience with those transactions. We understand that there's a lot of demand for the property in the Bahamas. The reason we did it is we wanted to be consistent with our rate of 10%. We believe that it is better and more, it is better and more efficient to reduce transaction and closing costs and to focus on things like recurrent things like real property tax. So we have benchmarked our like closing fees, and we think that this is good. Now, it might be unpalatable to some people in the same way that we offer concessions to large investors to come in. We offer crown land concessions, we offer business license concessions, we offer property tax concessions. The vast majority of those in the real estate profession agree with the policy to have one flat rate. Of course, not everyone agrees. There are some differences, but we believe that is the best policy to pursue by keeping the rate consistent. I want to say too, Mr. Deputy, that Mr. Vice President, that we talk about reintroducing the VAT on the breadbasket and these other items. And I'm sure we would be hard pressed to find someone who would say that they saw a decrease in the stores since 2018 when VAT was taken off of these items. It simply does not trickle down. And so I think I have covered all of the points that were raised. Senator Gardner also spoke of digitization and the commitment to renewable energy, and we are committed to those things. And Senator Raming spoke about the possibility of property tax on family island properties as a potential tax, and I can say that that is not on the government's agenda. I didn't see the program that he referred to, but I'm thinking that perhaps the gentleman who he referred to was talking about in the future options that are available to other governments. That is definitely not something that's on our agenda, and I can say that unequivocally. And so, Mr. Deputy, Mr. Vice President, once again, I want to thank senators, and I want to quote from, I won't quote him directly because he was so dynamic in his delivery that I'm sure I'm not going to get the words right, but words to the effect that all of us come into this place and all of us come into public life to see how we can contribute for the better. And we might have different ways that we believe that we can do it, but at the end of the day, that is our objective. We are proposing these amendments because we think that it would put the government in a better position to deliver what it needs to deliver for the Bahamian people. Our commitment is that particularly with the VAT, to increase and target assistance to those who are most vulnerable. And as a government, we listen, and as we go on, if our policies are not working, are not bearing the fruit that we expect them to, then we assess and we make adjustments when necessary. But as it stands, Mr. Deputy, we believe that this is the right thing to do. And that belief is informed by research, study, and experience from other countries. And so with that said, Mr. Deputy, I want to once again thank all members for their contribution. And I would move formally now for second reading and committal. I will begin with the VAT Amendment Bill. I would move for second reading and committal of a bill for an act to amend the Value Added Tax Act.
Okay. Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following, you just did the VAT, that the following bill, we did all three. So we do all three at the same time. Yeah.
For procedure's sake, Mr. Vice President, we will move for second reading and committal of the supplementary appropriation bill. And then once we go into committee, we will also take up the VAT bill and the capital account expenses bill. So I move for second reading and committal for a bill for an act for the appropriation of further diverse sums of money for and towards defraying the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas during the fiscal year commencing 1st July 2021 and ending 30th of June 2022.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bills be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act for the appropriation of further diverse sums of money for and towards defraying the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas during the fiscal year commencing 1st July 2021 and ending 30th June 2022. A bill for an act for the reduction in the appropriation of diverse sums of money for and towards defraying the capital expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas during the fiscal year commencing 1st July 2021 and ending 30th. Okay. And then, okay. So the first bill having been read, as many are in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those who are opposed say nay. The motion is carried. Order that the bill be read a second time and committed.
Bill for an act for the appropriation of further diverse sums of money for and towards defraying the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas during the fiscal year commencing 1st of July 2021 and ending the 30th of June 2022.
For the second reading of bills,
Yes, Mr. Vice President, I move for second reading and committal for a bill for an act for the reduction in the appropriation of diverse sums of money and for and towards defraying the capital expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas during the fiscal year commencing 1st July 2021 and ending 30th of June 2022.
is there a second? It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act for the reduction in the appropriation of diverse sums of money for and towards defraying the capital expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas during the fiscal year commencing 1st July 2021 and ending 30th June 2022. As many are in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose say nay. The motion is carried. Order that the bill be read a second time and committed.
A bill for an act for the reduction in the appropriation of diverse sums of money for and towards defraying the capital expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas during the fiscal year commencing 1st of July 2021 and ending 30th of June 2022.
For the second reading of bills,
Yes, Mr. Vice President, I move for second reading and committal for a bill for an act to amend the Value Added Tax Act.
is there a second? It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to amend the Value Added Tax Act. As many are in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those who are opposed say nay. The motion is carried. Order that the bill be read a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to amend the Value Added Tax Act.
Committee of the Whole,
Mr. Vice President, I move that the Senate do resolve itself into a committee of the whole with Senator Darren Pickstock in the chair.
Second.
is there a second? It has been moved and seconded that the Senate do now resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole with Senator the Honorable Darren Pickstock in the chair. As many in favor will say aye. Those who oppose say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. The Senate will now resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole with Senator the Honorable Darren Pickstock as chairman of the Committee of the Whole in the chair.
Committee of the Whole.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye. Those who oppose, say nay. The motion is agreed.
Move 1 and 2, and then move 3. Mr. Chairman, I move that the short title be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye. Those who oppose, say nay. The motion is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that clauses 1 and 2 of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clauses 1 and 2 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, say nay. The motion is agreed. The motion is carried.
Mr. Chairman, I move that clause 3 be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clause 3 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Darren Hanfield.
Mr. Chairman, I move that clause 3A of the bill be amended by the deletion of the normals 7 and 8, as this clause seeks to add 10% to previously zero-rated bread basket and essential items. Second.
I second.
It has been moved that clause 3A be amended. Be amended as read. As many as are in favor, say aye. Those who oppose, say nay. The motion has been defeated. It has been moved that section 3 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye. Those who oppose, say nay. Section 3 has been agreed, is agreed.
Chairman, I move that section 4 be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that clause 4 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye. Those who oppose, say nay. The motion is agreed.
Chairman, I move that clause 5 of the bill be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clause 5 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor, the chair recognizes the Honorable Senator Darren Hanfield.
Mr. Chairman, I move that clause 5 of the bill be deleted in its entirety. If I may have a seconder, as this clause seeks to remove 2% from the property purchases at the value of $2 million or more.
I second.
It has been moved and seconded that clause 5 be deleted. Clause 5 of the bill be deleted. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, say nay.
Nay.
The motion has been defeated. It has been moved and seconded that clause 5 of the bill be agreed? As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, say nay. Section 5 is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that clause 6 of the bill be agreed.
It has been moved and seconded that clause 6 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, say nay. The motion is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the bill be agreed in its entirety.
Second. It has been moved and seconded that the bill be agreed in its entirety. As many as are in favor, say aye. Those who oppose, say nay. The motion is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, for the supplementary appropriation recurrent account expenses bill 2021, I move that the long title of the bill be agreed.
Second. It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye. Those who oppose, say nay. The motion is agreed. The long title is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the short title be agreed.
Second. It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye. Those who oppose, say nay. The motion is agreed. The short title is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that clauses 2, 3, and the schedule be agreed.
Second. It has been moved and seconded that clauses 2 and 3 be agreed, along with the schedule, I beg your pardon. As many as are in favor, say aye. Those opposed, say nay. It has been agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the bill be agreed in its entirety.
Second. It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye. Those who oppose, say nay. The ayes have it. The bill in its entirety is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, in respect of the supplementary appropriation capital accounts expenses bill 2021, I move that the long title be agreed.
Second. It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, say nay. The motion is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, long day. I move that the short title be agreed.
Second. It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, say nay. The motion is agreed. The short title is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that clause 2 and the schedule be agreed.
Second. It has been moved and seconded that the clause 2 and the schedule of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye. Those who oppose, say nay. The motion is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the bill be agreed in its entirety.
Second. It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, say nay. The ayes have it. The bill in its entirety is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Vice President do now take the chair.
Second. Speaker, I beg leave to. It has been moved and seconded that the Vice President now take the chair. As many as are in favor, say aye. Those who those opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. The Vice President will now take the chair. Mr. Vice President, I beg leave to report that the Committee of the Whole has examined the several bills, having made no amendments thereto.
Honorable Senators, Senator the Honorable Darren Pickstock and Chairman of the Committee of the Whole has reported that the committee has examined the bills, having made no amendments thereto. Third reading and passing of bills.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the following bill be read a third time and passed. The bill for an act to amend the Value-Added Tax Act.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a third time and passed. As many are in favor, say aye. Those opposed, say nay.
Hey. Hi, back. Sorry.
Order that the bill be read. The ayes have it. Order that the bill be read a third time and passed.
Bill for an act to amend the Value-Added Tax Act.
Order that the bill do now.
This way, yeah.
Well, ordered that this bill do now pass and the title thereof be declared to be an act, the value-added tax amendment number 2 Act 2021. Further reading of bills.
Thank you.
For the third reading of bills.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. For the avoidance of doubt, my vote on that was aye.
Aye.
Mr. Vice President, I move for third reading and passage of a bill for an act for the appropriation of further diverse sums of money for and towards defraying the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas during the fiscal year commencing 1st July 2021 and ending 30th of June 2022.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a third time and passed. As many are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And those who oppose, say nay. Ordered that the bill be read a third time and passed.
Bill for an act for the appropriation of further diverse sums of money for and towards defraying the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas during the fiscal year commencing 1st of July 2021 and ending 30th of June 2022.
Ordered that this bill do now pass and the title thereof declared to be Supplementary Appropriation 2021-2022 Recurrent Account Expenses Act 2021. Further third reading of bills.
Mr. Vice President, I move for third reading and passage of a bill for an act for the reduction in the appropriation of diverse sums of money for and towards defraying the capital expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas during the fiscal year commencing 1st July 2021 and ending 30th of June 2022.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a third time and passed. As many are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, say nay. Ordered that the bill be read a third time and passed.
A bill for an act for the reduction in the appropriation of diverse sums of money for and towards deferring capital expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas during the fiscal year commencing 1st of July 2021 and ending 30th of June 2022.
Ordered that this bill do now pass and the title thereof declared to be Supplementary Appropriation 2021-2022 Capital Account Expenses Act 2021. Further third readings of bills.
There are none, Mr. Vice President.
Ordered that the clerk do take the bills the bills passed by this Senate today to His Excellency the Governor General for his favorable consent. Resolutions.
There are none, Mr. Vice President.
Discharge of select committees. Notices for further meetings.
Mr. Vice President, I would like to renew all notices in favor of the government.
So done. Orders for clerk. Adjournment.
Mr. Vice President, I move that the Senate, at its rising, do adjourn sine die.
Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded that the Senate at its rising do adjourn sine die. As many are in favor will say aye. Those who oppose say nay. The motion is carried. Final adjournment.
Mr. Vice President, I move that the Senate do now adjourn.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the Senate do now adjourn. As many are in favor will say aye. Those who oppose say nay. The motion is agreed. The Senate stands adjourned.